Warning: some viewers may be too lame to enjoy the following information. El Toro is a massive wooden roller coaster located at Six Flags Great Adventure in Jackson, New Jersey. The ride was built by the Swiss manufacturer Intamin Amusement Rides and is a wooden prefabricated roller coaster. This means that every single piece of the coaster was machine cut, shaped, and drilled before construction in a warehouse. This allows for a wooden roller coaster that pieces together like a Lego set, meaning the coaster is built with the highest level of precision, leading to an ultra smooth experience similar to a steel coaster. Unlike a traditional wooden roller coaster, where all carpentry is done on site by skilled carpenters. This leaves room for error and can often lead to a rough wooden roller coaster. El Toro was first announced in September of 2005. I had just turned 10 years old. Back then, I was terrified of roller coasters and had recently ridden Batman the Ride and Rolling Thunder for the first time. Little did I know that El Toro would end up being the backbone of my future life as a roller coaster operator and enthusiast, hence the very name of this YouTube channel. I first rode El Toro in July of 2006 at the age of 10. Now over time, I've grown up quite a bit, and so has El Toro. So my thoughts on the ride in 2019 are quite a bit different and quite more descriptive than they were in 2006. So let's dive right in. Built into the Plaza del Carnaval section of Six Flags Great Adventure, El Toro is one of the few roller coasters located inside the park. Most of the coasters at Great Adventure are located at the edges of the park and extend outside the park's boundaries. But El Toro actually extends into the park. This means that guests are able to walk right under and around the ride's massive airtime hills and hear the roar of El Toro right up close. Or should I say fart. El Toro is famous for this noise it makes while cresting airtime hills. A noise that is completely atypical to your average wooden roller coaster or even steel roller coaster. This noise is unique to prefabricated wooden roller coasters built by Intamin, a noise many roller coaster enthusiasts refer to as the Intamin fart. What happens is the entire train actually lifts up off the track during these large airtime moments, but the train is caught by a set of small steel upstop wheels that ride underneath the track. As these small steel wheels spin rapidly, they let off this crazy fart noise. So whenever you hear this, expect massive airtime. This abundant amount of airtime goes hand in hand with the ride's name, El Toro, which translates to the bull in English. Just like a bucking bull, El Toro was always trying to throw you off its back as it hurtles around the tight layout. So I won't spend too much time talking about the theme of the ride because, well, there isn't too much of a theme to discuss, besides the massive bull statue at the front of the ride, which is very manly. Riders board into one of the two 36-passenger trains. I've never had an issue with El Toro's seats or restraints, and I've always found them very comfortable, but results may vary. After the ride operators cram all the fat Americans into the train designed for fit and healthy Europeans, you're dispatched out to the course. The ride starts with a turn out of the station, a rather wide left turn, taken at just a few miles per hour. People love to say that this ride has dull moments, and this would be one of them. The train exits a turn and runs over a set of drive tires, which feed the train into the cable lift. El Toro was apparently the first wooden roller coaster to feature a cable lift, but I find this untrue when I watch POVs of even older wooden roller coasters built in the early 20th century, which all feature cable lift hills. But El Toro was certainly the first wooden roller coaster to use an elevator-style cable lift hill, where the train attaches to a catch car, or in this case, the elevator, that hoists the train up the lift hill rather than attaching directly to the cable. This provides a very fast ride to the top, which is a great way to get things started. It has most guests saying, "Oh shit," as they rapidly approach the top of the 181-foot tall lift. Now the train does slow down as it approaches the crest, but if you're old enough like me, then you may have gotten the chance to ride El Toro in its first year of operation, where the lift hill did not slow down at the top, and the cable lift would dump the train into the first drop at full speed. While the rest of the ride wasn't any different, the first drop was absolutely insane. Well, in June of 2007, it was discovered that the lift hill needed to be slowed down at the crest, because from what I was told, trains were actually lifting off the track and then slamming back down over the crest, which would cause trains to actually scrape the metal lift trough in which the catch car runs through. No bueno. Many panicked when the lift hill was slowed down, but quickly realized it did not affect the ride at all. Even with the slowed down lift hill, the first drop still manages to be absolutely insane, and the rest of the ride was completely unaffected. So after cresting the lift hill, the train disengages the catch car and begins to roll forward on its own momentum, entering a left-hand turn. Most riders are used to entering straight into the first drop following the lift hill, but El Toro likes to taunt its riders. This gives a chance for the GP to question their lives. After rounding the turn, the very long train whips down the 176-foot drop at 76 degrees, and I mean whips. If you're sitting in the back row, this is one of the strongest moments, if not the strongest moment of airtime on the ride. You even get great airtime in the front and middle of the train. Now, El Toro features an 18-row train. This is quite the long train for a wooden roller coaster. Most wooden roller coasters run a max of 12 rows. So this long train will come into play and creates drastically different riding experiences depending on where you sit. Either way, the first drop is absolutely amazing and is easily one of my favorite traditional first drops on a roller coaster. The airtime is incredible, and this drop is best experienced in the back row for the whip and absolutely insane airtime due to the length of the train. While sitting in the back row, you can begin to feel the train accelerating while you are still on the curve leading into the drop, and then you are absolutely dragged down into the abyss. It is such a cool and intense feeling. Riders hit 70 miles per hour as the train rockets underneath the wooden structure, giving guests the illusion that their heads will smack the wood above, hence the nickname, head choppers. Another thing to note are that the valleys on El Toro are insanely tight. El Toro is famous for the negative G-forces it offers, which provides massive amounts of airtime, but it also features a high amount of positive G-forces. The valleys between hills on El Toro are tight, oddly tight for a wooden roller coaster, which normally feature long spread out valleys to spare the track from excessive forces. This presents a range of forces not commonly found on wooden coasters: high negative G-forces and high positive G-forces. Heck, not even most steel roller coasters offer this experience. So not only are the tops of the hills intense, but the valleys in between the hills are also intense, which makes this ride feel extremely fast-paced and aggressive. After bottoming out of the first drop and pulling 4.3 Gs, riders shoot up into a 112-foot tall ejector airtime hill. If you're sitting in the front, expect to be suddenly flung from your seat as you ride up the hill. I would describe the airtime in the front of the train as violent, because the airtime is much more abrupt and powerful as the long train shoves the front cars over the crest of the hill. Now, because of the length of the train, the front cars will hang up a bit at the top of each hill, which does make the ride feel a bit slower. Riders in the back will start this hill with extremely strong floater air, which then leads into extremely strong ejector airtime as the train accelerates down the drop, dragging the back cars behind it. I'd say the airtime in the back is much more comfortable and satisfying, since you do not experience a violent sudden burst of airtime and the entire ride feels fast. Riding in the middle seats provides the best of both worlds. Like in the front cars, riders in the middle experience a quick jolt of airtime as the train begins to crest, but the jolt is much less violent, and the ejector airtime is sustained consistently across the entire hill. Now this is how a good ride should be designed. The first airtime hill offers a full 3 seconds of powerful ejector airtime, which in my eyes is absolutely crazy. After whipping over the first airtime hill, the train hits a very tight valley, offering plenty of positive G-forces, which again, is something not common on your average wooden roller coaster, and even with all these forces, the ride still manages to be pretty smooth. Now, something I like about the front on El Toro is that you can feel the train pushing the front cars into the valleys between each drop. So I usually feel more positive G-forces in the front due to these more noticeable changes in velocity during the valleys. Whereas with the back cars, the ride feels noticeably faster over the tops of the hills, but the speed feels more consistent overall. Many people say you should only ride El Toro in the back, and I half and half agree with that. The back car is easily my favorite spot on the coaster, but I find the noticeable changes in speed found in the front cars to be intense in a different way that I find oddly satisfying. Next, the train heads up into a 100-foot tall ejector airtime hill. This hill is extremely similar to the 112-foot tall hill right before it, but it's even better. The airtime on this hill feels even stronger and is just as sustained as before. And something I love is that this hill provides ejector airtime into a sea of head choppers as the train plunges below another hill on the ride. The valley out of this hill is also tight, providing great positive G-forces and helps keep the pacing alive. The train shoots up into a small, fast-paced 82-foot tall turnaround, which takes the train in one direction and spits it out in the opposite. Riders bank sharply to the right and experience floater airtime as the train levels out and heads into a sharp right turn. Now, many riders may not even notice the floater airtime offered here, as it is much less abrupt and distinguished compared to the powerful and sustained ejector airtime hills before it. But the sound of the upstop wheels slapping the track does not lie, and neither does the data here, provided by the app Ride Forces, a brand new app that records G-Force's riders' experience on attractions. You should check it out. Link is in description. If you're lucky and get a looser lap bar, you may notice the floater airtime. I'm a veteran rider of El Toro, notice everything after hundreds, if not over 1,000 rides since 2006. The sharp banking throws riders into the turnaround, which is a swooping right-hand drop. I love to sit on the right side of the train, which is super close to the catwalk below, which makes the ride feel even faster than it already is. Now the turnaround is actually one of the most forceful moments of the ride, as riders again experience over 4 Gs. You can feel the forces build as the train goes further and further down the drop into the valley at the bottom. Now many riders complain that the bottom of the turnaround is rough, and it kind of can be depending on what you consider rough. Now in 2019, it appears some track work was done to the turnaround, as I personally feel no jackhammering at all. But I never felt much jackhammering to begin with, even in a wheel seat. A key trick to get the smoothest ride in El Toro is to have your car of 6 people completely filled. So the more weight you put in your car, the more smooth your ride will be, as the train will weigh itself down to the track. I used to test ride El Toro all the time when I worked the ride for several years, and I would test ride in empty cars. And when the car is empty, it does jackhammer a little bit. And so I guess for me, I'm used to that, so when I ride it with people, it always feels glass smooth, but results may vary. I've ridden much rougher wooden roller coasters in El Toro, where the entire ride was rougher than the jackhammering found on the turnaround. Maybe it's just me, but I personally do not get bothered if a ride is amazing, but also rough. To me, some rides are better that way, and I like my wooden coasters on the rough side, unless it's a rough and boring wooden coaster. Rough, but amazing wooden coasters feel alive, and seem to always offer slightly different experiences, which is why I typically prefer woodies to steel coasters. But whenever I hear people complain that El Toro is rough, I often question how they would react to a ride like the Voyage at Holiday World, Gold Striker at California's Great America, or Boulder Dash at Lake Compounds, which in my opinion are far rougher rides, and at the same time, some of the best wooden roller coasters in the world. Now going back to the ride, the forceful turnaround shoots the train up into a large floater airtime hill. The pacing on this hill is much less intense than the first 3 hills before. In fact, this hill is actually taller than the turnaround. I've always compared this hill to one of the slower hills found on many wooden coasters built by Custom Coasters International, where the train suddenly rises up higher than before, offering a pause in the ride before plunging back down into insanity. For me, this hill sets the train up for the second half of the ride. Riders in the back of the train will experience strong floater airtime as the train heads down the drop. Now the front and the middle of the train receive weaker floater airtime at best, since the climb into this hill is twisty instead of like a camelback. So overall, this hill is best experienced in the back. Now this section of the coaster is what many coaster enthusiasts consider a dead spot, or one of the duller moments of the coaster. There are less positive G-forces, and riders experience floater airtime rather than ejector airtime. Now to me, I've never really considered this a dull section of the ride. When comparing this section to the first 2 airtime hills, they are technically duller, but when comparing these hills to most roller coasters, they aren't really that dull. If I compare the first 2 hills in El Toro to the first few hills on the Voyage at Holiday World, you'll notice that El Toro completes 3 elements in the same time it takes the Voyage to complete 2 elements, and these are big elements. So clearly, the first few hills in El Toro were nuts. I've always found the middle of the ride to be comparable to other wooden coasters, but El Toro's first few hills are taken rapidly faster than most other roller coasters, which might make the middle seem dull since it is far less intense than the beginning hills. The train exits the large floater airtime hill and flies over a speed hill, which whips by the station as the train ducks under a sea of head choppers. This hill offers a fun amount of floater airtime, and I find the floater on this hill best in the front cars, but I love this section of the ride because it feels so fast. The train pulls up into another speed hill, offering a quick pop of floater airtime. Standing next to the hill, you can hear the upstop wheels one by one slapping the track. But this hill is more of a step up, as riders suddenly bank to the left and enter a forceful left-hand turn, passing under a few quick and seemingly random head choppers. By this point, the quote-unquote dull moment of the ride is over, as the ride tightens up again. The remaining portion of the coaster is interesting because it was designed to fit within Rolling Thunder, a now defunct racing wooden roller coaster that used to stand right next to El Toro. Exiting the tight turn, riders ride up into the famous Rolling Thunder hill. This hill is famous in the roller coaster community for offering some of the strongest airtime ever, and it originally served the purpose of hopping over Rolling Thunder. This hill is absolutely nuts and blasts riders out of their seats with powerful ejector airtime. This hill is best experienced in the back cars, but isn't too bad in the front either. The front offers powerful and violent ejector airtime, but the pacing does die down as you wait on the back half of the train to accelerate down the drop. The middle offers smooth and continuous ejector airtime, of course, and the back starts off a little weaker, but then absolutely slams you with ejector airtime as the train whips down the drop. Now this hill can be a little moody. The hill is rather tall for its placement along the ride, and has a very sharp crest. Even when running fast, the train does not take this hill at extremely high speeds like the first two airtime hills. Now this is on purpose because the crest is so tight. So when the ride is running a little slow, the hill can underdeliver a bit, but you shouldn't have to worry much about that because 95% of the time, Toro is hauling ass. But if you attend the park on a cold day in the spring or very early in the morning on a summer day, the ride does need a little time to warm up before this hill delivers to its full potential. And try to ride with a full train of riders for the best results. The hill will sound like this when it's not quite warmed up. You'll notice the fart noise dies out a bit at the top of the hill. When the ride is running fast how it's supposed to, the fart noise will be strong and consistent over the entire hill, like this. Either way, this hill slaps. Now I do prefer the first two major airtime hills to the Rolling Thunder Hill. I've always loved how sustained the first two hills are, but the Rolling Thunder Hill is perfectly placed in the layout. It's tucked away towards the end of the ride and offers a strong burst of ejector airtime and a steep drop to lead into the last quarter of the ride, the twister section. Coming out of the Rolling Thunder Hill is one of the tightest valleys on the ride. This intensity is also best experienced in the back car. Next come some of my favorite elements on the ride. The ride enters a series of tight S-turns. This is the first half of the twister section and the better half of the twister section. It is tight, fast, and forceful. The turns deliver powerful positive Gs, and the changes in direction are fun and offer a good mix of lateral forces. Now the changes in direction do not offer the same intensity found on Maverick or Intimidator 305, but for good reason since there aren't over-the-shoulder restraints on El Toro to provide upper body support. Next, the train pulls up into a buckle, which is basically a twisting airtime hill where the train banks from the left to the right. This hill doesn't have ejector airtime, but a good pop of floater airtime. The train runs rather fast over this hill into another smaller hill before the final brake run. This hill always seemed a bit odd to me, but at this point, the ride is essentially over. Similar to Sky Rush at Hershey Park, where after the last airtime pop, the ride is essentially over as well, since it basically meanders to the final brake run. This must have been an Intamin design language from that era of their work. Now this little hill does offer a split second of floater airtime, so it's not a complete waste, and the train then climbs up into the final brake run, which is oddly tall, and is actually the tallest hill following the Rolling Thunder Hill. If you're sitting in the front, you'll get a good pop of floater airtime into the brake run. The train will then enter a smooth set of brakes, and I often find myself clapping after each and every ride in El Toro. The ride is 50 seconds long from the top of the first drop to when it hits the final brake run. So it's not the longest ride, but I wouldn't call it short either. Overall, this is a powerful ride. To me, El Toro has it all. An amazing first drop, powerful positive G-forces, powerful ejector airtime, floater airtime, incredible pacing, laterals, and a rather smooth experience. Now the ride isn't exactly glass smooth, and I really like that. To me, El Toro ages like fine wine. I end up liking the ride more and more every year as it ages. When the ride first opened, it felt too smooth, even smoother than an RMC, and now, there's no denying that the ride feels very wooden, and I love it. And for some reason, the ride seems to run faster and faster every year, which is just another added bonus. Now many people seem to get on El Toro expecting an RMC, and I recommend that you don't do that, as the ride is different from an RMC. RMCs typically feature a ton of elements taken back to back in a very quick succession, to the point where the elements seem to blend in with each other. Where El Toro instead will feature larger but less elements in the same footprint. Many seem to expect El Toro to be more like Wicked Cyclone or Twisted Timbers, but the ride is more like a hyper, offering larger elements rather than a large amount of bunny hills. Steel Vengeance, for instance, also has a ton of elements, but I wouldn't really say that any of the elements individually on Steel Vengeance stand out to me. The blend of them is what makes that ride so good. I find each element on El Toro more memorable as they are more defined and dramatic individually. So if you walk onto El Toro expecting all the elements to blend in with each other, remember that you are boarding an Intamin, not an RMC. If you want to directly compare El Toro to anything, compare it to an Intamin Mega Coaster or another Intamin prefab. They have a more similar design language. Now that's not to say that El Toro will not offer similar qualities that an RMC does, but it does so in a different way. I find that El Toro executes its elements more intensely and dramatically. I much prefer several seconds of sustained ejector airtime over a rapid succession of quick ejector pops. I also love a ride with great positive G-forces, which El Toro has and RMCs don't. And because of that, I personally prefer El Toro to basically every RMC that I have ever ridden. And this extends to most other wooden coasters as well. Wood coasters do not offer the insane range of G-forces found on El Toro. Sustained ejector airtime is absolutely terrible for wooden coaster track, and the ejector airtime on El Toro is absolutely terrible for its track too, but shouts out to Intamin for including it anyway. Now, a lot of wooden roller coasters feature powerful lateral G-forces, which El Toro doesn't really, but the combination of G-forces that El Toro does have leads to the most intense experience on a wooden coaster that I have ever experienced. Thus, El Toro is absolutely the best wooden roller coaster that I've ever ridden, and I've been on some really kick-ass wooden coasters. So it's pretty obvious that I give El Toro a 10 out of 10. This is a ride that I find absolutely relentless. You spend so much time floating out of your seat, and I love the combination of elements. Many people like to ride this coaster in Car 6 Row 2 because it offers a smoother ride experience since the seat is not over a wheel, but I actually prefer wheel seats in El Toro because I find the non-wheel seats too smooth. Maybe I'm weird, but I like feeling the occasional pothole or the texture of the track underneath me. It just reminds me more and more that I am on a wooden roller coaster. My favorite seat on El Toro is Car 6, Row 3, right side. And I have also been a big fan of Car 2 lately. And to address a common complaint that I hear about El Toro, that the ride only has 4 moments of airtime. Yes, the ride only has 4 moments of ejector airtime, but also features several moments of floater airtime, and regardless, the ride isn't just about airtime. The ride features an aggressive vibe due to the fast pacing, high positive G-forces, quick changes in direction, tight turns, steep drops, tight valleys, countless head choppers, and many moments of airtime. And to me, that is what riders should walk away knowing. If you are an enthusiast who solely seeks the amount of airtime you receive on a ride, then I'd say open your eyes to other qualities that are offered on a great roller coaster. Now, this will conclude my review of El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure. In my opinion, this is the best wooden roller coaster in the world. Well, at least based off what I've ridden so far. Results will vary. I'm sure many of you have different opinions, and we should all respect that. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and my thoughts on El Toro. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.